Welcome to Fasken's 2022 Mining Series. This is our 12th consecutive series. I am Virginia Schweitzer, and I'm a part of the Fasken Global Mining Group. It's such a pleasure to be here today and to introduce this session. Today's session is our 13th of 15 sessions, which will continue until tomorrow. Please refer to the slide on your screen for some housekeeping items following the presentation. Now I will turn it over to my colleague, Paul Fornaciari, who will introduce the speakers of the 12th Annual Latin American Mining Update, a baker's dozen of sweet mining information. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Virginia. Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Fornaciari. I'm the head of the Latin American Practice Group of Faskens. We're again gathering some of the top Latin American mining lawyers and experts to update us on what is cooking south of Trump's wall. You will hear what issues are sizzling on the grill from Patagonia to Sierra Madre, and we look forward to raising a glass of tinto with you again this year. Let me introduce the Iron Chefs for today's factual cook-off, most of whom have been serving up the beef since we started this seminar 12 years ago. First off, our Latin American region mining risk expert, John Price, Managing Director at America's Market Intelligence, one of the leading business intelligence firms out there. And to add some jalapenos to this year's seminar, John will moderate the information banquet with the panelists. From Argentina, again, good friend Saul Fehlbogen from Vitale Manoff Fehlbogen. Brazil, this year, Marina Bertucci Ferreira is filling in for Carlos Vilhena. He couldn't make it this year on short notice. Marina is a senior associate at Pinheiro Neto's Brazil office and works with the Mining and Government Relations Group. From Chile, my good friend Carlos Pérez Cotapo from Cariola Diez Pérez Cotapo and Compañía Limitada. From Colombia, again, great friend, longtime friend and panelist member, Álvaro José Rodríguez, José Herrera, and Ruiz. From Ecuador, María Isabel Ayllón and Jaime I always mispronounce Jaime's last name, Saldumbide. From Pérez Bustamante and Ponce. And Mexico, of course, the venerable Jorge Sanchez from Haynes and Boone. And lastly, but not least, everyone knows Oscar Benavides from Rodrigo Elias and Medrano Abogados. So let's throw the blood sausages and short ribs on the parrilla and get this started. Over to you, John.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Great to be back with this group of incredible mining legal minds, the best in the region. Thanks to the network of Faskens who brought us all together here. What we're going to do is we're going to, because we're such a disparate group representing 7 different jurisdictions, rather than go through jurisdiction by jurisdiction, we're going to touch on 3 themes that are hot topics at the moment, if you like, in the Latin American mining world, and bring in panelists from different countries to give us their perspective on that particular theme. As a result of that approach, what we'd like you to do is you're listening to the topics, and the first topic, by the way, will be political interference, followed by environmental impact, followed lastly by, more broadly, regulatory and legal uncertainty. So what we'd like to do is receive your questions as soon as they pop into your mind, and go ahead and type them into the Q&A icon, which should be at the bottom of your screen. That way, as we finish up the panelists' interventions in each of these themes, I can then pick the questions. Hopefully, there's lots of them to pick from, and ask our panelists to address those questions before we then move on to the second theme and the third theme, where again, the panelists will discuss the topic. You, the audience, will raise the questions and we'll answer those questions. So without further ado, and having buried the lead, I'd like to talk first about political interference. You know, in recent years, you've heard on this panel and others that the risk paradigm in Latin America had clearly shifted from the sort of national political stage to local communities. So much of the risk had become local in nature. But we are now find ourselves in a world of high resource prices again. And having gone through a post-COVID anti-incumbency wave, which is not yet over, I don't believe, of electing populist leaders, most remarkably in Peru and Chile, who are promised the electorate to get more out of mining. We have more potentially disruptive elections ahead of us this year. Gustavo Petro, who's the leading candidate in Colombia's presidential election, which starts just in a week. He openly derides coal mining and has also questioned some of the iconic mining projects in Colombia at the moment. In Mexico, of course, we're now in the fourth year of AMLO, and we're sort of getting used to an unpredictable level of intervention by the executive in all kinds of sectors, including mining. In Ecuador, the election of Lasso brought a certain degree of hope, but his political capital has waned, and with it, the hopes of some important reforms as well, including in the mining sector. So there's a lot to talk about in this area, and I'd love to first turn to Carlos Perez in Chile to talk about this issue of political interference, what's going on in Chile.
Okay, thank you, John, for the introduction. I would like to thank Fasken and Paul for organizing this seminar. As you all know, in Chile, we had recently elections and Mr. Boric was elected as president. He will start his presidential period this Friday 11 and is going to last for 4 years. On the other hand, as you all know, we have a constitutional convention that is drafting the new constitution for Chile, and they have to finish the work by July of this year. I will address the main changes that could impact the mining business, which will include community matters, mining royalty modification to the mining code, and some water matters. In relation with the communities, I would like to point out that when we started with the mining business in Chile more than 50 years ago, mining company didn't have any relation with the community because it was not necessary. And at that time, the communities didn't bother the mining companies. Nowadays, mining companies have an intense relation with the communities, especially because they are much more empowered and active. And they have a lot of negotiation power when a project is going to start. By the way, they can delay a project for a long time, and they can also stop a mining project, saying that the mining activities are affecting the land where they live, the water rights, the forest, and the way that they have been living. Today, it's extremely important for the mining companies to negotiate with the community before they start the project. Because as I said, the community can delay the project and they can even also stop the mining project. It is important for the mining company not only to negotiate with the communities before they start the project, but they also need to be negotiating with them during all the life of the mine. Mr. Boric, our elected president, has a big interest in developing the communities of all the territory of Chile. For him, it is very necessary to give the communities land restitution and access to the natural resources. Regarding royalties, as I said, on September 18, 2018, was submitted a new mining royalty draft and still pending for the approval. The new mining royalty established a flat rate equivalent to 3% of the extracted minerals. And as I said, it's still pending to be approved. This mining royalty is going to affect not only the copper, it's going to affect the lithium and all the mineral resources that we produce in Chile. The mining royalty, this mining royalty is based on the market price, which means the London Metal Exchange, without considering the cost of production, profitability, amortization, and other considerations. Boric, the elected president, has said that he will maintain the incentive to invest in mining, but he will implement a royalty to recover a large amount of money. considering the price of the copper. We just made some amendments to the mining code. The main amendments that we made are the following. In relation with the exploration mining concessions, we increased the term from 2 years up to 4 years without the right to extend the concession. There is also a new obligation for the exploration mining concession to submit all the information that they obtain during the exploration to the National Mining Service. For the exploration mining concession, we reduced the term to constitute the exploration mining concession, which is very good because it was a long time in the past to obtain the concession. The owner of the exploration mining concession also has the obligation to submit the report of the activities that they are doing in the exploration mining concession. Additionally, it was increased the cost of the annual mining fees, which used to be very inexpensive. It is important to keep in mind that all these changes will go into effect on February 4, 2023. Regarding lithium, as you all know, Chile is a mining country, and together with Bolivia and Argentina, we have more than 50% of the lithium resources of the world. Salar de Atacama is currently the area with the highest global deposit of lithium from brine. Chile's lithium is high quality and very inexpensive to produce. On January this year, the government of Chile delivered the result of a lithium public tender process, awarding 2 contracts for $120 million. The appeal court of Copiapó accepted 2 protections claims to paralyze the lithium tender process. So far, we don't have any news regarding that tender process. Mr. Boric criticized the award of this lithium process because for him, it was too close to award this for the existing government in relation with the term that expired in their period. Mr. Boric has said also that he would like to create a national lithium company to develop a new national industry. And finally, regarding water, we are having a very difficult time regarding water resources in some areas, especially in the north of Chile, where it's our desert, and most of our mines are located in that area. For the same reason, the mining companies are starting to replace the water wells that they have for seawater. And for doing that, they are building their own desalination plants, and they are pumping the water from the ocean up to the mountains where most of our mines are located. In some cases, they are pumping the water from the ocean up to 4,000 meters high. Mr. Boric's program wants to establish that the water is a national good for public use, common good, or collective good, depending on what is said by the Constitutional Convention. As I said, this convention has to finalize the new constitution by July of this year, and immediately after that, we are going to have a referendum in order to see if the Chilean population accept or reject the new constitution. If for any reason we reject the new constitution, the existing constitution will remain in place. Thank you, John.
Excellent. Thank you, Carlos. So much going on in Chile, both at the constitutional and now at the political level. I'd like to bring in Oscar Benavides in Peru now. Oscar, tell us, you've had a pretty wild political scene in Peru the last few months with the new president. Tell us how this is, to what degree there's political interference going on in this new administration in the mining sector.
Thanks, John, and hi to everyone attending. Yes, indeed. I would say that as 2016, in Peru, we have now a second national sport, the first one being football or soccer, and this one is now Choose Your President. And we're having one every year since 2016. We have had 5 presidents. The good news of that is that all of them have been impeached or appointed constitutionally. There's no been any rupture or disruption to the constitutional framework of the country, which is good because somehow helps to strengthen our institutions. But going back to your question, indeed, as of July of last year, for 7 very long months, we've had a new president. He's President Castillo. He was elected with a very, very, very scarce majority, I would say, even a scarce minority. He only won the election for not more than 40,000 votes, which is practically nothing. And there was an election where we have had complaints about fraud, none of them fully proven, but there was a lot of fear because Mr. Castillo had a very radical speech. To give all of you an idea, hardly no one knew him 2 months before the election. The guy didn't show in any surveys, any polls. He was not present in the public life of the country. His background is of a teacher coming from a far away province from Lima. He's not as sophisticated as other candidates were, but he had a very anti-speech in many ways. And we have to bear in mind that this election came in a very special situation in Peru. As you might know, the pandemic hit hard Peru, one of the countries that had suffered the most with the pandemic around the world. So people were particularly upset with how this had been dealt from the government. They were upset with what was coming. And in many pockets of the country, that spirit was reflected in this vote for President Castillo. If you see the map of Peru, the more, I would say, the areas of the country where there's more economic boom, Lima, the northern parts of the country, they've solidly voted for the other candidates. While the more depressed parts of the country, which traditionally have had some distrust of what they call the centralism of Lima, which is the capital, they voted for Mr. Castillo. So at the end of the day, this guy was elected with a very, anti-mining, a lot of things speech, but something is different when you get into office. So we have had now evidence that, first of all, he has not been able to move along with reforms that would have been very harmful to the Peruvian economy. The Peruvian economy is still having the momentum, we're still growing, things are still happening here, despite of Mr. Castillo and despite of politicians, because of the strength of the solid roots that we do have, one of them being mining. But those reforms have not been able to be moved forward, essentially, I would say, for 2 or 3 main reasons. One is the lack of support that Mr. Castillo has throughout the country. The latest polls say that probably 60 or 65% of the people want him out of office to resign, so he doesn't have the support. Second, he doesn't have a support at Congress, which is very important for passing reforms. And third of all, he lacks of ability of technicians. He doesn't have the people. He honestly, and I don't want to sound too hard, they don't have ideas. They don't have plans. They don't have programs. So they are doing nothing, which is a tragedy because Peru we have a lot of things to improve and there are a lot of things that must be done, but things are not being done. Being cynical, it might be better not to do nothing than to do anti-reforms of things that we would regret. So nowadays, we are still in a permanent political crisis. We've had 4 cabinets in the last 7 months. Actually, later today, there's going to be a vote in Congress, and that vote might have the outcome of having a 5th cabinet if the Congress doesn't approve this new cabinet. So there's a lot of instability. Tomorrow, to give you another very current example, there's going to be most likely presented an impeachment request at Congress. So they want to have Castillo at Congress, and because there are a lot of allegations about corruption, essentially of the people that he has appointed, and unfortunately, even in his inner circle. So things are very, you definitely don't get bored when you watch the news here in Peru at night. Every day there's something new about politics. but that's where we are. There are some good news because amidst of all of this instability, the country was able to continue with the current president of the central bank and most of its board. That is very, very important in Peru because under Peruvian constitution, the central bank is not only autonomous, but it's pretty much in charge of controlling inflation. And these guys are very good at what they do. The central bank in Peru is kind of an isle of excellence within the administration, the public administration. So that's very good. And this can be cynical as well, but the Congress has been able to sack a number of ministers that were actually, bad would be generous with them, but they were too bad for investment, so they have been sacked as well. So my message here will be, these are difficult times. These are unprecedented times. I don't remember this kind of instability in the last 40 years, perhaps. But still, everything is within the range of the Constitution, is within the path of what needs to be done. If you ask me, or if someone asks me whether we're going to have a new president in the next 3 months, I don't know. It might very well be possible that President Castillo could be sacked by Congress. They are trying to get the votes. They don't have the votes yet, but they have more votes than they had last month. And this is a work in progress, very much fueled by the media. The media's investigations are eyes-opening in many cases. Many of the left parties that supported Castillo now have walked away, or they're beginning to sprint away from him, because they are, here in November, we have regional elections. So there's a political measure that is going to be taken there, and everyone wants to control what they will do. So these are uncertain times that, again, to finish, I don't think that they have had they have a direct impact in the economy, in what we do, but I don't think that has been that harmful that many people believe it will. Things have just not happened because of these 3 lacks of President Castillo of ability, lack of support, and lack of power in Congress. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's quite remarkable that from afar how dysfunctional things look politically in Peru. But as you say, the constitutional framework has remained. It maintains its integrity. Certain institutions that are truly important for their autonomy have remained so. And that has, I think, kept private investors, particularly experienced private investors who know the country, committed to keeping their investments in the country. And so you have this country has had a wild political ride for a while now, and yet continues to be one of the consistently fastest growing economies in the region. Before I bring in Alvaro Jose Rodriguez out of Colombia, I want to just remind the audience to please, we're talking about political interference, please go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A section, because we want to address them while we are dealing with this theme. And with that, please, Alvaro Jose, share with us what's going on in Colombia.
Thank you, John. Well, I think the essence of what's going on in Colombia right now is that we are still keeping our cool. It's not a given that Petro is going to be elected. So just for the benefit of the audience, I think you should know that we have congressional elections this weekend. And it doesn't look like Petro and his party are going to get a majority. We don't think there's going to be a left-wing majority in Congress. And that's an important point, because without a majority in Congress, similarly to what has been happening in Peru, there will be some level of control. There will be a presidential election at the end of May. And if Petro or any other candidate doesn't achieve a majority, there will be a runoff election. And what has happened in the past, particularly when President Duque was elected, is similar to what is happening today. Petro is leading the polls. He seems to be very strong. He seems to have a lot of support, but it's not entirely clear if he is going to have sufficient votes to get an absolute majority and avoid a runoff. And if there is a runoff, we may see something similar to what happened with President Duque, which is that all the other candidates and all the other, let's say, political movements will coalesce against Petro, and he may very well not be elected. But if he does, we still have, solid institutions in Colombia. As I said, he will probably not control Congress. We have a solid constitutional framework. And remember, a very strong constitutional court. At some point, when President Uribe, who was the most popular president in Colombia ever, wanted to get elected a third time, which was not permitted by the Constitution, the Constitutional Court shot that down. So we are also very hopeful in our Constitutional Court and our institutions. If he does get elected, of course, he has said that he is very much against mostly coal and oil. He is running on a sort of climate change, energy transition platform, which is very attractive, particularly for young voters. And he has said that he will try to stop, additional oil and gas and coal exploration activities, but that he will respect existing contracts. He has said also that he is in favor of metals and gold mining. He has spoken against open pit mining, and he has also said that he will try to promote mining in areas where such mining is environmentally sound, not in areas where close to water sources or to lands that are agriculturally, that may have agricultural uses. So it's not that he has spoken completely about against mining, but surely there will be some level of interference. He will certainly not, let's say, be as welcoming to foreign investors and to multinationals as previous governments have been. So we do anticipate that if he were to win, there will be some level of disruption, but he cannot change the existing framework, and he probably wouldn't have the votes to change the mining code. So what we might see is perhaps delays, perhaps difficulties, more political interference, but not an overall change in the basic legal system.
Excellent, thank you. An interesting trend that may be emerging here, and I mentioned this ahead of inviting Jorge Sanchez of Mexico to comment. Populist leaders who generally frighten investors soon find themselves in a situation where that capital loss or that fuga de capital weakens the currency. And so they usually end up embracing industries that can't go anywhere. And mining, of course, is one of them. You can't move a mine to another country. So like you can move a factory, or you can decide not to invest in something. So and I mentioned that because in Mexico, the early days of AMLO showed a true anti-mining bent, and he ended up becoming more accommodating of mining. Now, there's a lot more color to that story, but it's an interesting potential trend, and may end up miners may end up finding themselves in Colombia actually being supported by a government that needs them fiscally. Jorge, tell us what's going on in Mexico. You and I have had chats over the last year or so. It's been an interesting period since AMLO came to office, but what's the scene now in terms of political interference by his administration in the mining sector?
Thank you, John. Well, there's been a lot of political interference since AMLO took office back in 2018. And you can see that with what happened first with the cancellation of what was going to be the new Mexico City airport, which was going to be one of the largest and most sophisticated airports in the world, which was canceled, as well as with a brewery plant in northern Mexico of Constellation Brands. Both projects were canceled through a so-called consultation process, which is different from the one regarding the mining sector, but basically the same basis for carrying out this consultation process. So there's been a lot of political interference from his cabinet. And as you pointed out, at the beginning of his administration, he was targeting the mining industry as a whole, saying that more than half of the territory of the country had been concessioned to miners, which is completely untrue. Just 10% of the country is subject to mining concessions. And nowadays, his interference in the mining sector has not been that active, or at least that visible, but still he's been interfering quite a lot. As we discussed some months ago, he took over the mining fund, which was created to finance educational infrastructure and water projects in the mining communities where mining companies operate. He dissolved that fund and basically he funneled the funds to the Ministry of Education, basically to support educational activities. But in reality, he's been using those funds to basically propaganda and for his political activism rather than investing those funds in infrastructure projects. Another very issue that I would like to highlight is the fact that he is also trying to monopolize the lithium industry in Mexico, which at the time is non-existent. But like Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia, Mexico enjoys one of the largest lithium reserves in the world. And he's trying to monopolize the lithium industry by saying that he's not going to grant any concessions to private or public companies, but rather he's going to create a state-owned company which would be in charge of exploring and exploiting lithium over the coming years. And he said he will respect 6 mining concessions, which are currently owned by a Chinese company. Used to be a Canadian company, Bacanora Minerals, but nowadays that company is Chinese controlled. So interesting enough, he says that there's not going to be any private investment in lithium, but at the same time, he respects the concessions being held by this Chinese-owned company. As you may have read in the news, he's also trying to pass a bill that will amend the electric power sector, and that would have a very, very negative impact in the whole country and especially in the industry. And in the mining sector, it's going to have terrible consequences because, as you well know, mining and extractive industries has a high consumption of power. So if that bill does pass, it's going to make the mining industry very expensive in Mexico and very uncompetitive vis-a-vis other mining jurisdictions in Latin America. The discussions are going to take place again in April, and there's a lot of opposition from the US and Canada under the USMCA trade agreement. So the expectation from private investors and from the community is that this bill is not going to be passed, or at least is not going to amend the constitutional framework governing the power and the utility sector, but is going to have minor changes that will not necessarily impact the industry as a whole. Where we're seeing a lot of pressure from the US and also threats from both the US and Canada to bring arbitration cases for under investment treaties, not just USMCA, but other bilateral investment treaties. So that's also a very important issue that's impacting investment in the country. Additionally, another form of political interference from AMLO's administration is a lack of response of the government to activities of organized crime and illegal blockades. You may see that some of the most important mining operations in the country have been threatened by illegal blockades and also by organized crime. And the government response has been null or practically ineffective. So that's also a very big challenge. And investors wonder whether they are being protected by the government or it's just a lack or complete lack of interest in the government to tackle this very serious problem. And finally, but not least, we're experiencing a very serious lack of rule of law, which is impacting all of the industries in the country.
Great, thank you, Jorge. Yeah, a lot to think about there, and it goes so much beyond what goes on in the executive branch. As you say, there's other stakeholders here. There's organized crime. There's the labor unions. There's the judiciary, and the degree of collusion is obviously up to speculation, but there's no question there's suspicions there. I want to remind again the audience that we're talking about political interference in the mining industry, and I'm going to give one more shout out to you all to please submit your questions in the Q&A. And now, without further ado, I want to invite, we have 2 panelists from Ecuador, Maria Isabel Ayon and Jaime Zaldumbide. And I believe Isabel is going to address this question on behalf of her firm. Please go ahead and share us your thoughts on Ecuador.
Thank you, John, and thanks to the audience for being here today. Well, of course, it is very important how political interference and how the political situation and the executive branch could interfere in the mining sector. In Ecuador, President Guillermo Lasso started office on May 2021, and the government began its period with more than 60% of popularity over the voters, which was unprecedented. And the main objective of the government at that instance was to start a powerful vaccination plan in order to avoid pandemic adverse effects. The strategy of the government was successfully developed, and the president, of course, increased popularity. Notwithstanding this advance, later on, and unfortunately this happened, the government had to face important challenges in the country. A criminal system crisis, a very strong opposition of the National Assembly, the Congress, to approve important economic reactivation reforms and laws. There was an environmental disaster derived from the rupture of the national oil pipeline. Of course, environmental opposition to extractives in general, and illegal mining. The actual government of Ecuador is now a business-oriented government. The President Lasso is showing support to foreign and local investors to boost the local economy. And they are pursuing the economic development under sustainability standards. Without any doubt, mining is a powerful industry that can boost the economy in Ecuador. According to recent data that was collected by the Ecuadorian Mining Chamber, foreign investment in the existing mining projects is projected to be around 21,000 million, and the fiscal income related to mining will be around 44,000 million. And this is just during the life of the mines that are currently operating. Also, the exports in the mining sector grew on 182% in relation to 2019, and the amount of mining exports overcome 2,000 million. The government has been also taking important steps to warrant the foreign investment and local investment in Ecuador, especially in relation to foreign investors. One fundamental message that the government sent was Ecuador returning to the International Center for the Settlement of Investment Disputes, ICSID. There's also the signature of 2 investment warranty contracts as an alternative to the non-existence of IBTs in Ecuador. In this contract, the government is warranting tax and legal stability to important investments that are being made in Ecuador. 2 of these contracts have been signed for mining projects. There was a big event in November. It was called Ecuador Open for Business, where the government showed how many projects are now available for mining investors in Ecuador, and mining took a very relevant part in that investors event. There's also, in relation to mining and the oil industry, but I'm just going to refer to mining, the president, they launch or they issue an executive decree 151, and they were stating relevant actions to develop an efficient mining sector. One of the main issues that was developed on that decree is that the government, they ordered the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Natural Resources, Energy and Natural Resources, to start working together to execute a protocol in order to provide more efficient proceedings for permits and, of course, legal reforms and regulations that can boost the mining sector. The government also announced a midterm potential opening of the mining cadastre. This is still going on, but they have been doing a consultation with the World Bank in order to perform actions and to execute a more efficient system for the mining cadastre to be less speculative. Illegal mining has been something relevant, of course, because in the last month, several investigations processes have been successful, and the government is fighting against illegal mining and sending a very powerful message in relation to that. However, the president is also sending a supporting message to environmentalist organizations, and the government is keeping a low profile in relation to mining. There's now, we can say, a dichotomy that the government is trying to overcome by sending a strong message of how impactful will mining be for the Ecuadorian economy and how responsible mining will be the only way to fight against illegal mining. Among the difficulties that the government is facing, we have the Ministry of Environment on one side, and as Mexico was saying, we have other relevant actors in the sector, not just the executive branch. And it's the Ministry of Environment on one side defining hydric recharges and protected areas as free mining zones. And this could, of course, be difficult for some projects that are going on. On the other side, we have the Constitutional Court and the National Assembly. There's a current modification of the mining law that is now under the knowledge of the National Assembly. And there's also a just recent reform of the law for hydric resources, specifically in relation to which areas should be considered as mining-free zones. We will further explain how Constitutional Court decisions are now impacting mining and what can we expect in this regard.
Excellent. Thank you, Maria Isabel. We've received one question. I believe, Carlos, it's probably directed at you. Given the recent approval by the Environmental Committee, how likely is nationalization for any copper or lithium assets in Chile? And is there a timeline around formal decisions related to this?
Yeah, as I said, the Constitutional Convention has to finalize the drafting of the new constitution by July of this year. In order to approve that draft internally, they need 2/3 of the votes. I really think it's very unlikely that they are going to get 2/3 of the votes to approve the nationalization of the mining industry. In addition of that, after they approve the new constitution, we are going to have a referendum in order for the Chileans to approve or reject the new constitution. So if for any reason this is approved internally in the convention, I really doubt that the Chilean will accept the nationalization of the copper and the lithium. So my final answer is that I think it's absolutely unlikely that we're going to see this as we saw this back in the 1970s.
Thank you. No, I completely agree with you. We want to switch gears here for a moment, and we've already begun talking about the importance of the environment and how the environment plays a role in public opinion, in political opinion, and of course in regulations. And the fact is that in Latin America today, some of the most promising geology lies in areas where water resources are key. Whether it's lack of water resources like northern Chile, whether it's water resources that are shared with farmers, with towns, with national parks. This is often the case in the sort of humid part of the Andes, or whether it's some of these deposits are found near glaciers, as is the case in Argentina and Chile. And certainly in Argentina, we've had a lot of confusion around glacier regulations. In northern Brazil, mining in designated parkland, which was liberalized somewhat under the Bolsonaro administration, did cause quite a bit of outcry and a sort of celebrity-led protests. And then, of course, the Constitutional Court in Ecuador has been busy of late resolving cases related to protected forests. So I'd like to ask our panelists from these three countries, start with you, Saul, in Buenos Aires. Can you tell us about environmental issues in Argentina? And again, just one more note to our audience to please submit any questions related to environment so our three panelists can address them in a few minutes.
Thank you, John. And I want to thank the audience for being with us today and my distinguished colleagues. Let me say some words of introduction. We have been here together a year ago, and at that time I explained some restrictions affecting Argentina. I talk about exchange controls, about withholding taxes, inflation, struggling with the foreign debt. And most of these problems are still there. Not all of them, but most of them are still there. However, I want to tell you that in Argentina, in 2021 and the last part of 2020, we received M&A transaction for 5.3 billion. There was the announcement of investment of around 9.3 billion in different areas. Zijin company, the Chinese company, acquired Neolithium, the Canadian company, for 900 millions last year. Lundin acquired Copper Jose Maria for 500 million, this sort of a transaction. So why these things are happening in Argentina is because the earth is flat. We have two sides of the controls. On one side of the coin, controls and then activity. Well, I will give you the answer, but you have to be patient. I will introduce some mystery here. Don't leave the meeting, because my answer will come in the next questions. And now I will address John with this environmental question. The National Glacier Law, yes, was introduced in 2010. And the idea, the main aim, was to preserve the strategic water resources for human consumption in Argentina. At that time, the new law defined what a glacier was, what the periglacial environment comprehends, and ordered to conduct a national inventory in order to know where the glaciers were located. But at the same time, the law prohibited certain activities to be performed in that areas, mining one of them. In the same minute the law was enacted, most of the environmental organizations said, well, this is done. Mining is banned to be performed not in where the glaciers or the periglacial areas are, but in the whole Andes mountain. You cannot perform any mining activity all around the border with Chile. Companies were also scared because some of them already have obtained their approval from the provincial environmental bodies, and with the new law, they didn't know where they were staying at that time. So this private company, they started court cases in order to get some certainty about the approvals they already had. Some provinces, they also didn't want a national inventory to interfere with these provincial approvals. So they started their own inventory. It was a mess at that time. But little by little, the national inventories keep moving. The supervisory body issues a number of guidelines and explanations about the scientific principles they were using, how they were analyzing the benchmark of different countries, and they finished the inventory. It was a very nice piece of activity, very hard work. Under this inventory, they decided to include glaciers that only perform to be a glacier according to the size, a minimum size of 1 hectare. We can compare in Canada, the minimum size is 5 hectares. So they were very strict. And the periglacial area, that was a challenge to define, because in some cases it could be a longer area rather than the glacial area, was considered taken in consideration the relevant water use that contains that area. Of course, when this inventory was finished, environmental organizations were not happy, and they sued the member of the supervisory body who conduct the inventory. Criminal case against them. It's a pity. But little by little, the court cases from the companies arrived to the Supreme Court. And finally, the Supreme Court issued some very important guidelines that provide some comfort to the industry. The guidelines state that there is not any ban or prohibition to the mining activity in the Andes or in the periglacial or the glacial activity, as far as there is not an environmental assessment, meaning if there is a project that may affect a periglacial area, an environmental assessment must or need to be conducted in order to determine whether, according to the national inventory and according to the principle of relevant water usage, this project may affect the periglacial environment. So this helps a lot because it helps to ease most of the tension on the projects located in the nearby areas. And nowadays I have to say that the attention shifted from glacier to water permits, because water permits are granted on local, by local jurisdictions, and they are not using the same grounds in order to grant the permits. So what we will see coming in the next future is some discussions, some problems probably regarding the use of water in the surrounding area of where the projects are located.
Excellent. Thank you, Saul. Marina, you've been very patient. We're very happy to have you. Marina Bertucci Ferreira in Sao Paulo. I believe you're in Sao Paulo. Maybe you're in Minas.
I'm in Brasilia.
And in Brasilia. There you go. Marina, talk to us about, it's a very interesting period of time. You've had an administration that's been almost antagonistic against environmentalists. You've had a judicial system that's been very supportive of environmentalists. This is a real battleground issue in Brazil. Can you shed some light?
Yes, it is. Thank you, John, and also the FASCN team for organizing this. It's great being a part of such a qualified group. I do know I have large shoes to fill, so let's get to it. So recently, the federal government, as you mentioned, launched a program aimed at developing artisanal mining, which happens mostly in northern Brazil. And it's a region where there are, it's the Amazon and lots of protected areas there and in indigenous lands. So the federal government claims that the program intends to improve practices in the business, as well as ensuring health and dignity to the people involved in it. But it was not very well received by the public opinion. But this was not the only regulation with some kind of environmental impact. There were actually several new regulations to the Brazilian mining sector in 2021 and early 2022, which include environmental issues. And I would like to highlight the Pro Minerals policy that was created last year to offer government support to mineral projects that qualify as strategic, whether for their uses in technology processes or beneficials to the balance of trade. And qualifying projects receive assistance from the federal government on permitting and other processes and institutional help aiming at minimizing risks and solving conflicts. The National Mining Agency it has also issued new regulations on tailings dams. They were recently updated and came into effect some 2 weeks ago. The regulation now compiles provisions that were formerly contained in several pieces of legislation, resolutions, ordinances, and it also addresses changes made to the national dam policy back in 2020. With the ban on upstream dams, deadlines for relocation of communities, and so on. The regulations to our mining code have also been amended in the last few weeks. And it, among other changes, it enlarged companies' responsibilities regarding recovery of degraded areas. And there has also been a decree introducing new guidelines for the protection of natural caves, which allowed industrial activities nearby caves considered of maximum relevance, that is, caves with unique geological aspects or historically relevant caves, provided that the activity causing impacts is of public utility and cannot be implemented in other locations, and is properly licensed and cannot be, the damages are duly compensated. So there has also been a lot of negative backlash in the media and Congress and also at the Supreme Court regarding this specific decree which the Supreme Court eventually granted an injunction suspending parts of it, and the case is now waiting to be examined. So you see that there were lots of new regulations aiming at sort of making the rules more strict from an environmental standpoint. And on the other hand, there have been government regulations that flexibilized rules a little bit. So yes, it's been quite a battleground here.
Excellent, thank you. And of course, major elections coming up this summer, which may change the tone and direction of things as well. Yeah. I'd like to bring in again our colleagues from Ecuador. Both Maria Isabel and Jaime wanted to comment on this issue. I don't know which of you would like to go first.
Thank you, John. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure being with you and sharing this very interesting panel. Well, in Ecuador, the environmental issues have been also always very sensitive. Although it's a small country, we have a lot of natural resources. The country, the highlands, the Amazon basin, where regretfully for the industry, most of our minerals are located. So the environmental issues have been always since the back to the oil days in the exploitation of hydrocarbons in the Amazon basin. And nowadays, basically, the exploration and exploitation of mineral resources in the highlands and in the foothills. So our constitution is one of the first constitutions in the world that grants rights to nature. Nature is subject to constitutional rights, meaning it has the right to be repaired, to be protected. And so we have very stringent provisions, constitutional provisions regarding the care of the environment. Among those, we have mining activities forbidden in the national protected areas, where mining activities are not allowed. But also, water is considered a strategic natural resource, and these two elements have affected, if you want, the development of mining activities in Ecuador. Most of our late mining discoveries are located either on the highlands or on the foothills of our Andes Cordillera. And in the highlands is where the water sources or the water is how you say, the paramos are the sources to generate water for agricultural purposes or to provide water to the cities. So there's been a lot of activism against mining activities in those water sources, especially by a former president candidate called Yaku Perez, who is a defender of water, and he has created a lot of political noise during his political campaign and during the last elections. He ended up running third in the election. So and that also, together with the assistance of non-governmental organizations, they have been very, very active opposing mining activities. And those actions have reached the Constitutional Court of Ecuador, who has been very active lately, issuing resolutions banning activities in certain areas, environmental sensitive areas, including protected forests, which are not part of the national protected areas. And actually in protected forest, mining activities fulfilling certain specific environmental requirements are allowed. But now a recent resolution from the Constitutional Court expand that prohibition of the Constitution expand the concept of national protected areas and include the protected forest. So that was one of the late resolutions issued by the court. But we have to take into consideration that those resolutions are applicable for the future, but to a certain extent are jeopardizing mining activities in those areas. I don't know, Marisabel, if you want to add something else to these resolutions from the court regarding environmental protection.
Yes, thank you, Jaime. Just a couple of hints, and I'm guessing the audience perhaps is wondering what's going on after this resolution of the Constitutional Court. As Jaime was mentioning, the court has been solving some interesting issues. And why are they doing this? Because they do have a power of review of certain cases. This is a power granted by the Constitution. However, they are trying to execute this power in a sort of way of sort of certiorari, as the Supreme Court in the United States is doing it. However, they have to limit their decisions in relation to strictly constitutional issues involving that. However, in those couple of judgments that Jaime was mentioning, the court is trying to go a little bit way beyond. And what is going on after that? That a lot of projects in Ecuador are being subjected to constitutional actions. There was one like three weeks ago, and there was a positive resolution in relation to the mining project. Now we have two other projects waiting to be submitted to a constitutional claim. It's the El Cisne project and the Loma Larga project. The hearing will be, one is tomorrow and the other one is on Monday. And the court is discussing whether environmental permits of those projects pursue the regulations and the standards that were supposed to be pursued at the time that they were granted. So there's going to be so much going on as a consequence of those resolutions in the constitutional actions.
Excellent, thank you. We have one remaining question related to environmental. And Saul, I'm going to ask that you type the response to that so everyone can see it, because they just want to know the case name. And in the interest of time, I'd like to move on to our third section, where I'm going to ask us all to talk about, in each of you to talk about in your respective countries, the regulatory and legal uncertainty. Prior consultation is an issue closely tied to the sort of battles of hearts and minds in Latin America's mining communities. But it also has a legal angle, and certainly it has become a hot topic in Ecuador, a bit of a topic in Mexico as well. In Peru, of course, we've already talked about, and certainly Oscar has shared with us the political disruption and the lack of traction, really. But there have been some calls for stopping projects, for changing projects. And more importantly, early on in the Castillo administration, there was a call for some measurement of social license related to projects, some sort of formula that was never really properly explained. I'd love to hear your input in terms of where we are on that. In Brazil, we are going to have a new election. The polls right now tell us that Bolsonaro will not be reelected, of course. Who knows what surprises ahead of us, but maybe we could hear a little bit about how you expect the legal and regulatory frameworks in Brazil might change under new administration. And of course, in Colombia, which has a very rigorous, I would call it, mining licensing process, and which is, maybe you may disagree with me, Alvaro, but I would call it a shaky political support, where politicians in Colombia don't seem to have, when facing opposition around mining, seem to lose their support for mining relatively quickly. And then, of course, in Argentina, Saul has already, commented on some of the confusion that essentially a dual jurisdiction system very strong provincial regulations over certain areas and national jurisdiction or supervision over certain regulations can confuse miners. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists. We'll start with Jaime in Ecuador, followed by Jorge in Mexico, then Oscar, and then I'll call the others, to just spend a few minutes either telling us what you think are the most pressing issues or perhaps complementing your earlier comments. Thank you all in advance.
Thank you, John. Yes, in the case of Ecuador, you know, the indigenous activism has been very, very strong lately. In Ecuador, the indigenous communities have a political party called Pachacutic. They have they ran third in elections. Mr. Yacu Perez was his candidate. So currently, I think they have around 27 congressmen and congresswomen, and they are very active. And of course, as indigenous communities, they are very much in protection and defense of nature. So they have, the indigenous communities have a political arm. And on the other hand, they have the support from NGOs, environmental NGOs. So they have been very, very active in Ecuador and also in taking judicial actions against mining activities. So we see that as an element that has been affecting the normal development of mining activities. Of course, there's in Ecuador, we have the constitutional principle of having the prior consultation process to indigenous communities where the and mining or natural resources are to be exploited in their areas. They have the right to undergo a prior consultation process. And also, there is a process of what we call consulta y participación ciudadana, which is the citizens' consultation with processes that may affect the places where they are living. So our constitution recognized two kinds of consultations: prior consultation to indigenous communities, and prior consultations to any kind of inhabitants located in areas that will be subject to the development of any project. The problem we have faced lately is the lack of a prior consultation law for indigenous communities. And so that has been used by the indigenous communities or local settlers, because not necessarily the projects are located in indigenous communities by themselves, but in areas located where mixed heritage people live. So not necessarily indigenous communities. But that lack of this particular law, because the other law, the prior consultation to communities living in areas with any kind of project that needs an environmental assessment and environmental license, that law, that legislation is enforced. The lack of this particular law, which is now sitting at Congress and hopefully will be approved soon, will help to clarify this gray area where we are living now, and that has been used by NGOs and political parties to try to stop the development of mining projects at the constitutional level. So I think I'm running out of time, so that will be it from my side. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Jaime. Very quickly, when do you expect a decision from the court on that? Because that is a lot of mining projects are very curious about that decision.
Actually, according to a decision by the Constitutional Court ordered the National Assembly and the executive to issue a consultation law that was supposed to be ready for the end of December 2020, I guess. And the Congress and the government failed to comply with that resolution from the Constitutional Court. Now, recently, it's in the agenda of Congress, that law, and hopefully we'll have it approved within this year. Nobody grants that, but possibly it will be this year.
That would be great. Jorge, in Mexico, not an easy task, 3 minutes to summarize the most important regulatory and legal issues.
Same problem as in Ecuador. We don't have a legal framework applicable to prior consultation, and country is covered with so many indigenous communities, and therefore this is a big challenge for any mining company. And just recently there was a case, a very famous landmark case, I would say, Almaden Minerals from Canada, whose mining concessions were recently canceled by a decision from the Supreme Court of Justice by virtue of a litigation case that took 20 years and challenged the priority of the use of mining over any other land use. So the court did not deal with the real core issues surrounding this case, but unfortunately canceled the mining licenses. And this poses a challenge because since we don't have a legal framework, mining companies would be exposed to unreasonable prior consultation processes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Oscar, please share with us your thoughts on these issues.
Absolutely. There are two things that have happened, but the most important things are the ones that have not happened, which are very good news. The things that have not happened, I will begin with that, is first, the current government announced a new constitution. Unfortunately for them, unfortunately for the country, they have not been able to move ahead with that plan. Not because they don't have enough support on the people, but because the current Congress approved a constitutional reform establishing an additional law for constitutional reforms because the government wanted to do it via referendums. So that window, it's never closed, but it's now semi-closed, which is good. Second, landing on mining, they said that they wanted to approve a new mining law. Once again, no traction on that because that needs to be approved by a majority in Congress that they don't have. Third, they wanted to pass new regulations on mining taxation. Since those kind of regulations or laws have to be passed by Congress, they asked Congress to be given the ability, the president, to legislate on that. And the answer was no thanks. So they have been unable to amend the taxation mining regime, which is good in terms of maintaining certainty in what will happen in the near future. And finally, as you said, John, our president, when he took office in late July of last year, in his inaugural speech, he said the mining project would be promoted, quote unquote, under the concept of social profitability or social cost effectiveness, whatever the heck that is. No one's known really what that is. That hasn't been defined by no one. So again, that doesn't have had traction anymore. Just to give you an anecdote, in that same speech, the president said that our Palacio de Gobierno, our White House, was going to become a museum. So, and that lasted just 2 weeks because they knew that they couldn't do that, so they came back. So we have a government that says a lot of things, barks a lot, but doesn't have the traction. And now they are learning that they shouldn't be even proposing things. They are officially, well, you never know what they will do, but they are handing or taking down their proposition of a new constitution. They're saying that that can wait because they know that they don't have the support. And of the things that have happened late last week, our constitutional court passed a decision specifically saying that the granting of mining concessions do not require to pass for the previous consultation proceeding of ILO 169, which is a good precedent. That decision, that of course can be changed by another court, another constitutional court in the future, was not a pacific one. There were at least two of the justices that voted against it, but still that's something that can be seen as positive. And the other change that we've seen in the last year or so, not by this government, is that Congress passed a law, a previous Congress, a year ago or so, passed a law attributing liability, personal liability, to the shareholders of companies that do not comply with closure plans, do not comply with them in the, I would say, willful misconduct or the alike, right? Which is very significant because they are penetrating the corporate veil, which is a principle of all corporations, right? So now shareholders have to be a little bit more careful but only for mine closures plans that are not compliant. This was as a result of the experience of a Peruvian company, not an international one, that decided just unfortunately to leave the project as it was and did not execute or what they had to do. And that was the reaction of Congress. But in a nutshell, I think that in the last few months, there has not been significant changes to the mining framework, legal framework. There's still uncertainty because this is a government that was elected with the flags of reforms on the mining sector, but they don't have the traction, they don't have the support. So I don't see that it's going to be likely for that to happen, but it's not completely a closed door.
Thanks so much, Oscar. Marina, in Brazil, of course, we have elections this summer. There's talk of return of Lula, but you seem to have a Congress in Brazil that remains quite centrist and quite pro-investor in the net summation of everyone's vote. How do you foresee post-elections the regulatory legal environment changing for mining investors in Brazil?
Well, thank you, John. There has been quite a deal of uncertainty in Brazil. We're on the edge of our seats, monitoring news on candidates or pre-candidates, their chances against each other. And at this stage, it is difficult to predict the impacts of the 2022 elections on current mineral public policy, as the scenarios are still a little unclear. We'll have not only presidential elections, but also we will renew Congress, actually the whole House and part of the Senate. And we'll also have state elections. So a lot going on. And you were right, the polls do show that Bolsonaro will not be reelected, but they called for a similar scenario back in 2018, and then everything changed closer to the elections. So we don't know. And as we like to say it, anything can happen, including nothing. So nevertheless, no major shifts in current policies are expected, regardless of the winner of the national elections. The re-election of Bolsonaro would probably have a more favorable impact on mineral public policy compared to the election of Lula. But really, institutions such as the Public Prosecutor's Office, which are quite strong and very independent, they have been acting in a restless manner throughout Bolsonaro's term, in spite of his laissez-faire administration. So we do not expect major changes. There is also the so-called third-way candidates, which are being considered in public polls, but none of them has shown enough support yet to effectively compete with Bolsonaro and Lula. And nonetheless, these candidates, the so-called third way, although they are focused on economic development, they might not support controversial matters such as mining in restricted areas, for instance. Just a quick remark here, while I'm speaking of restricted areas, and maybe a little outside the legal uncertainty scope, but in 2020, the federal government had introduced a bill aiming at regulating mining in indigenous lands. And Congress analysis is still in an early stage, but the federal government has included this bill in its priorities for 2022. So there is a chance it may move forward. And today, the House Speaker granted an interview stating that the matter has become urgent as Brazil is highly dependent on fertilizers from Russia, and the bill may help secure our internal production. So we may have some developments in this end. Of course, approval will depend on the executive and legislative branches working together to agree on terms. And as voters tend to see mining in indigenous lands as somewhat negative, they might not want to sponsor the bill so close to the elections. This proximity of a vote has great impact in Congress, as they are negotiating positions and changing parties for the upcoming elections. So this makes it less likely that a lot of significant changes are turned into law in 2022, such as the proposed reform of the mining code that was discussed last year, or raises to statutory royalties. Finally, we believe that the upcoming elections will bring mining and mainly environmental issues to the spotlight, as these issues are highly controversial. They generate a lot of buzz among the public opinion, and they will evidently be turned into political agendas or campaign topics. So any regulations considered more flexible or potential incidents will gain a much greater impact than what they really have.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's the case in several mining jurisdictions. It becomes an election issue each time. Peru is a great example of that. In Colombia, we have elections coming up. Alvaro, you've already commented on some of these issues, but I want to give you the chance to maybe hone in on regulatory legal issue that you are seeing as very important to your clients right now.
Yeah, well, I think that as you mentioned in your initial comment, the problem that we are seeing right now, and it will only get worse if someone like Gustavo Petro becomes president, is that the environmental authorities have, adopted this new excuse not to make decisions. So it's basically when you file for an environmental license, and there are several projects, including AngloGold Ashanti's Quebradona project and also Minesa Soto Norte project, which have all their permits in order, and all they require is the environmental license, which is the most important permit here, and it's based on an environmental impact assessment. So typically the decision for the environmental authority is to grant the license or reject the license, but the National Licensing Authority has decided that when it doesn't want to make a decision, because of course in the current climate, there is a political cost attached to the decision to grant the environmental license, but there is also a political cost and maybe even a legal liability to rejecting the license. So they have adopted this transparent excuse mechanism of saying your environmental impact assessment did not contain adequate information. And of course, we are talking here about environmental impact assessments that have been prepared by leading mining companies who hire leading consultants who spend tons of money. And so we have at least in two cases for the Soto Norte project and one recent decision for the Quebradona project. And so the environmental authority is just using that as a shield. I think that they are coming to the end of the rope in a way, because there are so many times that you can claim that an environmental impact assessment is inadequate. So I think that Minesa is going forward for the third time. Quebradona has filed, a recourse against the decision, and the environmental authority just hangs on to these minute technical details, and they come they issue a resolution that says that there are 170 things that need to be corrected in your EIA, but each one is a tiny technical point. So I don't see that as something that can happen many times. And of course, the companies have legitimate expectations, and there are recent decisions against Colombia for other reasons, but where ICSID tribunals have held that, investors have a right to a legitimate, a correct standard, of a minimum standard of treatment. And it is that if you have made an investment in the country and you have prepared like a reasonable, correct environmental impact assessment, then you should have a right to obtain a license. So that is something that I hope will correct itself, because there's not so many times that they can say, only so many times that they can say no. But possibly if the environmental authority is controlled by a leftist candidate, which is opposed to mining, it could continue to be a problem.
Thanks so much. That really has been a source of frustration, I know, for those miners. And I think what you just shed light on is really illustrative of what's going on. Thank you for that. Saul, you were saving a surprise for us. I remember you mentioned in your earlier comments. So please, the stage is yours.
Yes, for all those who decided to stay with us until the very end of this meeting, I have the answer. The truth is that this government proved to be friendly towards mining. The problems are there. Rather than having political problems, we are under economic problems. And the government has tried to give some solutions to the companies to overcome those problems. Regarding foreign exchange controls, well, Executive Decree 234 allows new investment or the expansion of existing facilities that when this investment surplus $100 million, they will be able a free disposal of export receivables outside the country, 20% of their export receivables. This means that they will not longer need approval from central bank for dividend payment of financing, trade debts. They will have free disposal. If the investment go up above 500 million, they will be able to use 40%, and above 1 billion, 60%. They give them also a foreign exchange stability certificate for 15 years. This is regarding foreign exchange. When it comes to VAT recovery, most companies spend during the construction time for 3 years, their expenses are charged with VAT. They are claiming the government to find some ways to give this payment back, because otherwise those expenses will be will be charged with VAT. The government is analyzing different schemes to give them money back. When it comes to time for withholding taxes, farming activity is suffering withholding tax of 30%. Mining activity is taxed with 4.5%. Gold is taxed with 8%. It means that even though the problems are there, the government has been trying to support and encourage the mining industry, and that's how we have seen newcomers into the country, and we believe it will keep moving in that way. This is my answer for today.
Thank you, Saul. Carlos, I wanted to ask you, with all this political change, Chile is known for having an independent judiciary, much like Brazil, but no judiciary is immune to politics and public opinion. So how do you see the Chilean judiciary reacting, or their posture, or how they're going to do their job in this time of uncertainty around the change of the constitution, around a very new political leader in Chile?
I think, John, that they are going to keep their independence. They have been totally independent for a long time here in Chile, and I really doubted that they are going to lose that independence. In the new constitution that they are drafting, so far they have said that the judicial is going to stay independent as well as it is. So I don't think we're going to see any change on that. The only thing that I have read regarding the new constitution, that they want to have 2 different kinds of judicial process for the normal citizens and for the aborigines, which is totally new for us. But besides that, I don't think that they're going to lose any independence at all.
Excellent. Thank you. Paul Fornaciari, Fasken. Paul, do you want to come in and say farewell and maybe share with the audience how they can get the recording of this incredible webinar ran through?
Yes. Thank you very much to the panelists. John, great job as the moderator. Always interesting. I don't know how to sum this up. Maybe we'll think about the takeaways here, and we normally send out a kind of list of 3 or 4 takeaways after we've digested the discussion. In terms of the recording, I will have to ask our team how to access it, but I think it just may be a matter of going to the website. But I will, I'll send out a note to the attendees if we don't get our folks here to tell us how to do that immediately. Again, thank you. 12 years running. It's always a great pleasure. I look forward to seeing the panelists in June at the Toronto PDAC, and hopefully our guests will be coming to join us in Toronto as well. We'll talk soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.